Good evening.
Welcome to another episode of A Question of Meaning with Arthur and Katie.
With the subject of crime is what we decided. We actually said the criminal justice system, but since our basic premise is we're all completely insane, the criminal justice would rather focus on crime and the criminal justice system will come up naturally.
Yeah, because what our show was about 2 weeks ago and then played last week was insanity, and on our premise that we are all insane. And so we thought that at the end of the program led nicely into crime, because we think that all crime is an act of insanity. And you know, that's the whole, the book that we're working on is called We Are All Innocent by Reason of Insanity. And that always brings crime up in people's minds, because that's what people start freaking out. What do you mean? You know, everyone's going to be let loose out of the prisons because they're all innocent by reason of insanity?
Yes, they can't help it. They should be allowed to roam free, just like dogs off a leash. Freedom and dignity for serial killers. That's our message, friends.
That's right.
And talk about bleeding heart liberals. Just listen to that. I'd like to send sick Glenn Beck on them.
Mm-mm.
Speaking of Glenn Beck, oh no, don't even go there.
No, we're not talking about
Speaking
politics.
of insanity, innocent by reason of insanity, you know, there's some people walking around loose who definitely should be institutionalized, fomenting rebellion, the antithesis of a patriot. Just like the Real Ugly Man party.
Actually, we were talking about, we watched a little clip from The Daily Show with Jon Stewart yesterday about the whole mosque, Ground Zero mosque controversy, and how the man who's funding the mosque, who's a terrorist ties, is also the second largest shareholder in Fox News. You know, it was kind of an amusing little
fair and balanced
satire. You know, just look at the whole know-nothing culture of the right wing.
7% of Fox News.
But
7%.
Anyway, when they were showing this really amusing section, is Fox News stupid or evil? In the section where the person who was the proponent that Fox News was stupid was showing clips of anchors saying really ignorant things. And one that was interesting to us, for reasons you'll see, is when one of the anchors said that she didn't know the meaning of the word ignoramus. So she looked it up, and the meaning she found was an ignorant lawyer, which is not the meaning of ignoramus at all, but it's kind of odd.
We've researched that word, and I've never seen that definition.
But the reason I brought all this up was because Arthur, actually, you made this little interesting route from our definition of the word ignoramus to why we think everyone's insane. And that could kind of, I just thought that would be kind of an interesting synopsis of what we mean by insanity.
It would be if I could remember what it was, but for the life of me, I can't. I kind of remember. You got it? You remember?
Well, yeah. So
last night,
ignoramus.
A long time ago.
An ignoramus is this dictionary definition that we found that we really like.
Our favorite.
Is a vain pretending to knowledge. So Curly in The Three Stooges is one of our examples of somebody who's an ignoramus, because he was ignorant of all sorts of things, but he acted as if he knew what he was doing all the time. And that's what made him so funny, was the scenes at dinner parties where he'd take the finger bowls and use it for an eye cup. I mean, you know, only an ignoramus, somebody who was ignorant of their ignorance, would act that way. And so that's what Arthur said last night, that an ignoramus is someone who is ignorant of their ignorance, which is in that vein of, we talked earlier about the unknown unknowns, which is...
If you don't know that you're ignorant,
right,
you think you know.
Right.
You think you're not ignorant, so you go preening and prancing around like Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, and regularly Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow, acting like you've got all the answers when you don't have any.
And somebody who is ignorant of their ignorance, someone who thinks they know when they don't know, is how we think everyone is. That we all have a mind-generated reality, and we confuse our mind-generated reality with actual reality. And that's what makes us crazy, because we're delusional about what is real. We're ignoramuses in that way. So do you remember now?
That's right. It's kind of like you were talking a couple of weeks ago about the unknown unknowns.
That's right.
You're not even aware of these factors.
Right.
You don't even know where they exist, but they do exist.
It's not just that you don't know something. You don't know that you don't know it. You don't even have the ability to frame the question.
You like people like George W. Bush because it looks like somebody just as basically dumb as you are. So you vote for him, and you don't kind of consider the consequences of electing a moron to the most powerful office in the world.
Okay, well,
You want somebody who drinks beer with you at a damn barbecue, and one of the reasons your economy is in tatters, and we may be in for a lost decade, is because you elected an idiot to be president.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about politics.
It seems it's on my mind lately. It's just that Beck rally. The only scientific study of that crowd, by the way, was done by CBS News that took the company called Air Photo, I believe, and airphoto.com probably. They took aerial photographs and they divided the whole thing up into a grid. And by doing samples, they were able to get the crowd estimate down to a plus or minus margin of error of 9,000 people. Maximum, the median was 87,000, not 300,000. I mean, still an appalling number, but after all the free publicity, the lamestream media has lavished on the Tea Party movement and their ilk, it was still an abysmal statement on the state of this country. But anyway, I seem to, but speaking of mass insanity, they can't help it either. It's just frightening to see the United States really going down the tubes, and the world, in fact, the hell with the United States, the world going down the tubes, but the so-called beacon of light, which has been extinguished. I mean, you could have just pointed to torturing prisoners during the Mongoloid, who was in the White House for 8 years recently. Just that alone was enough to extinguish the light of liberty and what we stand for, ladies and gentlemen. But that's insanity. I mean, I get angry because the basis of all fear, according to us, is the unknown. The basis of all hatred is fear. If you're afraid of it, you hate it. And that's why I hate you, conservatives, because you're so damn stupid. You're so misinformed. You think you know when you don't know. You have no idea what you're doing to this country. Patriots, my ass. But let's move along from politics. I'm sure we'll revisit this another day and get on the subject of crime.
Yeah, so why do we want to talk about crime? I mean, what is the big deal with crime?
Well, the subject really, for us, our work is about insanity.
Right.
And not the people in the few mental institutions that Ronnie Reagan left open. I can't stay away from it. But the few mental institutions that are left, and the people who we all know, and every family has the poor unfortunate who can't play the game, who can't conform, can't hold down a job, can't live their life buying and selling their butts like the rest of us. You know, selling our butts and buying stuff with the money we get. Kind of a socially sanctioned prostitution for life. They can't play that game, so they're kept medicated, or we put them away. And we're talking about a far more insidious kind of an insanity, a universal insanity. And we define insanity, just for starters, as confusing our mind-generated reality with actual reality. And actual reality is what really is, what is manifest in front of our eyes, which we can't see because our head's full of Glenn Beck and Keith Olbermann and Rush Limbaugh and Rachel Maddow and whatever, the John Birch Society, the Ku Klux Klan, whatever the manure du jour, the manure of the age is clogging our eyes and ears with prejudicial nonsense that we subscribe to, like Jesus is coming any day, that kind of stuff, happy fairy tales. What we're saying is we're all deluded because the exigencies of survival, just growing up, your family was prejudiced. Unless you're a strong person, chances are you're going to succumb to that prejudice. It's going to influence you. Even if you spend your life rebelling against it, it's had an impact. It's deformed your ability to perceive objective reality objectively. Same with the schoolyard. Everybody wants to fit in. Everybody wants to be accepted. Everybody wants to be, the swaggering quarterback, sauntering down the hall with his cheerleader girlfriend. I did, or vice versa. Going to be the cheerleader. cuckoo, or whatever the goth or whatever kids are up to now, whatever the social Olympus is out there. So we're required to act like we know all sorts of stuff. We really know objective reality, when the truth is we don't. We see very much through a glass darkly, all of us. But we have to act like we see with 20/20 vision. So we're all crazy on that level. So what is crime and why is it important? I'm glad you asked that question.
Let's see, what it took you about 4 minutes to.
Yeah, well, every show is like we have to start running and fill in all the blanks.
Right.
Because we have no idea who's watching. We never get any calls.
Oh,
Very
that's not true.
rarely do we get calls. I know people are watching because every time we're out in public, people say, like your show. Yeah, what do you like about it? My drop dead good looks, is that it?
Okay, so crime. I think you had just gotten up back to the question about why we're talking about crime, and it's just then you kind of came to a standstill. And I think that what the basis of crime and the whole idea of punishment of crime is based on is, and this is why we are interested in it, is because it's built on the idea of free will.
What's that?
That people choose to commit a crime from free will. And that is why the definition of insanity is a legal term, because the measure of whether somebody is sane or not is done to see whether they are capable of making reasoned choices between right and wrong, because the only way to hold somebody liable for their actions is to find them sane, and then we can find them guilty by reason of free will, the ability to make choices between right and wrong.
Right.
And that's why I said that when we talk about these ideas with people, oftentimes their first concern is that we're talking about releasing everyone from the prisons, because and that people would just go crazy and start committing all sorts of crazy crimes, because there'd be no accountability. If you don't have free will, if everyone's insane, then that means there's no way to find someone guilty.
Turn them loose.
And
of course that's not what we mean. The maintaining societal order is of paramount importance. Nobody is talking about turning criminals loose on this show. What we are talking about is dealing with criminals as people who are sick, who are under the spell of a very powerful form of insanity, an expression of insanity. Not willful, evil wrongdoers. Folks, it is so easy to hate. I hate all the time. I get mad in traffic. You know what getting mad in traffic is? Hating someone in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I was coming home today and almost got clobbered by this guy on Beaver Dam, coming out of a side street, just right in front of me. I had to slam on the brakes. Old guy, honked the horn, and he's up ahead of me going, what? What? I'm just pulled out right in front of you. And it scared me. And when you're scared, you're afraid. And when you're afraid, you hate. It's just, they're hand in hand.
But, okay, so what, and we've talked about this, the fundamental attribution error. What that is when somebody does something that we think is bad, we think that means they are bad. So if somebody commits a crime, that means they are bad. They are evil. They are wrongdoers. It means that in their essence, who they are is a bad person. So they need to be punished. And
what's that all about?
What we're saying is that, I just wanted to go with what you said, which was what we're talking about here is not saying somebody isn't responsible for having done something that, as a society, we consider to be an antisocial act that needs, that cannot be tolerated. But in what our society does now is somebody does that kind of antisocial act, we punish them. And you punish somebody who was bad or wrong. And that's like, bad girl, slap on the wrist. What we're talking about is saying that for somebody to commit an antisocial act, that means there's something wrong with their thinking. Their insanity, there's in the programming process of their life, there's some strange wiring has happened. And that as a society, wouldn't it be in our best interests to look at helping that person change the programming so that when they get out of whatever place we've removed them from, that they don't commit those acts again? What we do now is in our punishment system, it's all about the punishment and treating them as a bad person, which just reinforces that thinking usually. And so when we let them out, if we let them out, but usually we do let them out, then since nothing's been we haven't done anything to help them change their thinking, 99% of the chance are just going to continue on in that same way of thinking, which means they'll probably commit more antisocial acts. It's when you look at just from that practical, rational point of view, it makes complete sense to me that why not do something that would reduce the chances of people continuing to think and act in the same way.
It makes me think of a dog that's been abused, been beaten, and it's become really vicious and mean. Are we saying that there's no way that dog could ever be rehabilitated? There's no way with tender, loving care and patience and treatment that dog could maybe be domesticated again, could be soothed and brought back? I don't know, maybe not. But the attempt could at least be made, and we're talking about human beings now. Crime. What is crime? It's breaking the law. What law? I noticed the rat asses on Wall Street and the pig bankers are getting away with what if any of us robbed a 7-Eleven at gunpoint, they'd put us away for years. But these pigs are mounting, here we go with politics again, they're mounting an effort to bring the Obama administration down because you don't want to be regulated. You know what I'm saying? The hell with you little people. We can do what we want.
Well, do you know what? You see, if crime is breaking the law, then the way to stop your actions from being considered a crime is you write the law yourself.
Yeah, you buy a Congress like in this corrupt
country.
So
you have the
freedom
laws,
and democracy.
You have the laws written in such a way that your actions are in accordance with the laws.
That's right. You bend the law to the point until the spine snaps. And that's what these pigs are doing, and they're not going to regulate themselves. BP, the minerals management debacle, it's the best country money can buy. And don't worry, I mean, it's all for sale, and it's been bought. And that's why what's happening to you is happening to you. That's what's really happening to your country. Tea partiers, you're on the wrong side, suckers. Unless you're worth about $5 million and up, you're suckers.
Well,
to ever vote for the Republican Party or any of them. Really, we need a Green Party. We need to throw the whole bunch of bastards out.
Well, just in the vein of the idea of crime is breaking the law, something interesting. I read this book by Guy Talese called "Thy Neighbor's Wife," who had in where he looked at. It's been a long time since I read the book, but I was just reading some notes I took about it. And, it's about the cost of breaking social mores, like, say, having sex with your neighbor's wife. And the pertinent passage that he's saying that it's in the interests of a government to have all these laws that everybody's guilty of breaking some laws, because then your citizens are in a state of anxiety and kind of existential guilt is a way. Alan Watts talked about the same issue, that you're always guilty, and religions are the same way. By making the rules so hard to follow, everybody is guilty of breaking them. So when you're guilty, that means you play life in a defensive mode, passive mode, and you're afraid to challenge authority because your guilt can be found out, your crime can be found out, and you can be punished. So having these kind of laws keeps us all compliant. And I had thought about drug laws earlier, and I would bring these drug laws into this. That's one of the reasons you think we're ever going to, get legalize recreational drugs like marijuana. Well, one of the reasons not is it's not just that the liquor industry has such power.
Oh, that's
And the
part
last
of
thing
it.
they want is that kind of competition with the recreational drug dollar, but also
Quiet.
it works to the government's interest to have this huge population guilty. That we're if you are worried about the police finding your like half your couple joints.
Or you cheat on your income tax just a little bit.
Right. So it helps maintain the power structure when we're all guilty of crime.
Yeah, you give us, what does somebody write once? You show me a man's signature and I will find the evidence to hang him. Keep your head down. That's what's wrong with a lot of the illegal immigrants that are here.
That's right.
That's why they maintain a very low profile, because one false step and they're technically out. Hold it down, will you? Our
Yeah,
cat's
so
meowing.
maybe
She wants to be
that,
played with.
this is what I thought about earlier when we said what is crime. I mean, how do you who defines what is a crime?
Yeah, tobacco, legalized nicotine products that kill tens of thousands of Americans every year.
Maybe you could tell us what a crime is.
That's question of meaning, cat.
Yeah.
It's question of meaning, cat.
Yeah. See, is a cat ever guilty of crime?
No, because she doesn't have free will, do you? Mm-hmm. Even though she knows perfectly well how to manipulate as well as just about anybody I've ever met. So, where is this show going?
Well, so are we going to just...
So crime, okay, so that's it. I mean, and I was asking you, what does that mean? Because we love blaming people.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I love blaming. You know why? Because when I'm blaming someone, man, that makes me so superior. I'm so much better than them. And God knows I need to be better because I'm so insecure about who I am, as well I should be, since I have no goddamn idea who I am, or what I am, or where I am, or when I am, or what I'm doing, or where I came from, or where I'm going. Again, I'll repeat this till doomsday. No, K-N-O-W is an absolute state. If you know, if you say, I know that Jesus is coming soon, I know that Russia's right. You're full of it. You don't know anything. You don't know that the sun is going to rise in the morning. First of all, it doesn't rise. The earth is turning toward the sun as it revolves around it, turning on its axis, et cetera, et cetera. No one knows anything absolutely other than some kind of experiences happening at your location. And if you can refute that, call 808-8014 and tell us. But you can't. We thought about this long and hard, babies. The only thing you know absolutely is that something is going on where you are right now. And you got a jillion names for it, and you talk about the history of it and all that other stuff. But the truth is you don't know. And all that stuff you don't know has all sorts of power over you. One of the biggest powers, like an alcoholic who until he or she faces their alcoholism is completely under the control of it. That's why humility is so important, because as long as we're prancing through life acting like we got it all figured out, or we know as much as we need to know, we are lost. We are lost and under the sway of psychological forces like the myth and free will. You think you got free will? I know that's no, argument, but we can spend another few shows on free will. Take it from us, or just take this idea that even a skin response takes a moment, a half second before we even become aware that we've been touched. All the mental processing that we have to absorb every existent moment of now, every moment of the present. By the time we become aware of it, we're already we're automatically reacting to it. based on how we've reacted to similar moments of now all through our lives. And the older we get, the more fixed we become in our ways, and the more unwilling we are to learn new tricks. We're automatons. We are not in control. We do not have free will. And criminals, to drag it, lug it by the ears back to the point, criminals are even more red-shifted because society ideally is based on sound principles of fair play. That's what it should be about. But you got nonsense in there with it, like the attempt of prohibition back in the Roaring '20s. And you see how that wound up. And now we have the latest prohibition, the idiotic war on drugs. What drugs? Marijuana doesn't kill tens of thousands of your fellow people every year.
Okay,
but nicotine does. And that's legal. I don't care. Put some more tax on a retroactive, regressive taxation. Charge people for their nicotine fiend habit. I used to smoke the damn things. I know how hard it was to quit. It was easier than quitting cocaine.
I mean, it was harder than.
I mean, it was harder than quitting anything I've ever quit.
To get to
what crime is.
Yeah.
Crime is the willful breaking of the law. You absolutely know what the right thing to do is. You know you shouldn't shoplift. I've done it a little bit when I was a teenager, when I was an adolescent. I knew it was wrong, but there was this little voice, this little, having that pocket knife is more important because I don't have any money. It's okay to take it than to not take it. Simple as that. It was a mental justification, rationalization that the rules don't apply to me, that the end justifies the means. Our cat is acting up today.
Yes, so the mind rationalizes.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. So, what we said before is that the crime is this programming errors. And this is something that we can see in all of our minds, is that whenever I want something that I know I shouldn't have, like say I'm trying to lose weight, and I went to an art opening, and I'd actually kind of was eating less and trying to eat better. And I went to an art opening where they had fruit and all this nice things, and then this little tray, this tiny little tray with small brownies came by, and the women I was talking with, we all kind of went nuts, and I ate one of those brownies, which set off this like feeding frenzy. On the way home, I bought cupcakes and ice cream, and it was like
she even called me up and called me on from the road, and
because I thought if I brought myself cupcakes, I could not bring him
She was trying to get me to share the guilt, and she'd feel better about her laps. That's probably what it was.
Is that what it was? But anyway,
she called me up. I got her to bring me home ice cream.
Here's all this story I'm telling about. Of rationalizing why it was okay to do this thing that I didn't really want to do. But here's my story. Well, I was tempted. It was overwhelming temptation, and that
the way the brownies were arranged on the tray.
Right, and the brownie just got my sweet tooth activated.
Pure hysteria with the other
I'd
women.
had a tough week and all this stuff.
But
it was complete. You know what? It worked. It was okay. It made it okay for me. And this is the way the rationalization process works to justify our behaviors.
And we're suggesting that had all those component features been slightly different, had Katie had it not been such a bad week, had the women around her not squealed at such a level of delight, and there was a peer pressure, lust, let's face it. Any of those variables that were less, absolutely Katie would not have chosen the brownies. But this is how automatic it is. This is why we don't have free will, because it's the psychological equivalent of a devil on one shoulder, and an angel on the other. And the devil just had the upper hand at that moment. And there was no way Katie wasn't going to choose the brownies and
I was
the
really talking
and
about
the ice cream.
More pertinently was not what the decision I made at that moment to eat the brownie, because it was tiny. It was nothing. It was the justification, the rationalizations that went on later. And we're saying that this goes on in everybody's mind. So, and we love to use serial killers, say Ted Bundy, for
the
me,
extreme example.
always,
If it can't hold up.
right. I mean, that's a way to test philosophy, is to take extreme examples. And does it cover that also? Because if it doesn't, well, then it's not very good. And so Ted Bundy, I mean, was he evil through and through? And, you just have to read. There's actually an interesting book that answers this question. The Stranger Next Door, I think it was.
The Stranger Beside Me.
The Stranger Beside Me. Written by a crime, this
Anne
woman,
Rule.
she writes crime novels. And she was also volunteered on a crisis hotline in Seattle. And there was this really charming young man that often was right next to her answering phones at the crisis hotline. And, she got to know him, and he was really a nice person. And imagine her shock later when she found out that this young man named Ted Bundy was the man who had committed all these murders. So, I mean, there was her experience of him as a compassionate person volunteering his time to help other people in need. And he was an up-and-coming star in the young Republican group.
Party. He was going to be a lawyer. He was intelligent, bright, good-looking.
He had all these other attributes, and to say that he was evil through and through is a very mistaken view of who he was as a human being.
But even if he wasn't, even if he did have redeeming sides,
No.
who you're talking to. The argument is going to be he still had a part that he knew better than to do that, and he killed all those women, and he prayed, and he did everything he could to stay away and to keep doing it, to stay out of jail and not get caught. He was a rat ass who should have been exterminated like a rat, and he was. That's the argument. It's
Yes.
blame. It's saying he had free will. He knew the difference between right and wrong. I'm going to wring your neck if you don't shut up. The cat is really trying herself today. Spoiled.
Okay, well, what I was talking about was that I am sure, he knew what he was doing was wrong.
Absolutely. Of course he did.
Okay, I mean, with all, if all those things
I knew
were
what I was
true
doing when I
about
was
him,
wrong when I shoplifted.
right? But to live with himself, he was justifying and rationalizing his actions.
I know that I shouldn't exceed the speed limit. Anybody relate to that? Who drives like 7 miles an hour over the speed limit? Because we all know that if it's no more than 10 miles an hour, they won't pull you, right? Anybody relate to that? Fudging on your taxes just a little bit. Anybody relate to that? You know you shouldn't. That's the law. Anybody smoke pot? You know that, oh God, it's against the law. Who cares? Unless you get caught. So we know the difference between right and wrong. We know what the law is, and then we break it. We know the unwritten law of humanity is that you shouldn't kill anyone. You shouldn't attack anyone physically. You shouldn't steal. Society would fall apart if everybody did that. We all know that. And people do it. Just like some people know they shouldn't have eaten brownies.
So I always
wrong.
like the way you tell the story about Ted Bundy when he had escaped from a prison in Colorado. I mean, he knew they had the evidence on him.
He broke out of jail twice in Aspen.
Yeah, and the second time he got to Florida. I mean, he was beating. He was on the way to the death chair.
He was facing multiple murder one charges. They were just getting ready to link him to all those murders in Washington State.
And he made it all the way to Florida. So what would
Got new ID.
What would somebody who was sane do at that point?
I mean, the hatchet is hanging right over your neck, and there's a chance you got fake ID. There's a chance you could just kind of disappear into the background.
Right, you could get out of the country. I mean,
there's a chance.
Right. And what did you do? Within 3 days of arriving in Tallahassee.
One night, finding he had nothing else to do.
Well, I said I like the way you tell it.
He got a limb and went into a sorority house and beat women's heads down. And then another victim down the street, he broke into her apartment and savagely beat her and just went on a complete spree. His last victim was Kimberly Lee. She was 12 years old. He took her from a schoolyard on the side of the road in front of God and everybody. The guy's demons took over. I mean, all sanity would scream at the top of its lungs. All logic would say, You got a chance to beat this. You've had your indulgence. I mean, you've had your fun, and maybe you can escape. Lie low. But something happened that night in Tallahassee that made him go berserk. And that's what everybody who picks up something in a store, everyone who steals, you know you shouldn't gossip. You know you shouldn't talk about other people. But when the temptation, when the piece of news is just too juicy not to pass it on, you do it. I do it. We do it. We have no free will. And knowing the difference between right and wrong, and you should do it and you shouldn't do it, doesn't mean a damn thing if at the moment you do it, or you have that, you're looking at whether to do it or not, the devil, the psychological devil, the aggregate belief system in your head that justifies what you're about to do says, do it. And you do it. We do it.
So the Florida legal system said that Ted Bundy was sane because he knew the difference between right and wrong, and thus because he chose to do wrong, he deserved to be punished, which in this case meant to die for his crime. And we're saying that he knew the difference between right and wrong, and he chose to do wrong because he was insane. That's what makes him, that's just more evidence of his insanity. And that's why we need to,
You know why I would disagree with the way you put it, because it's always going to be interpreted out there. He didn't choose a damn thing.
Right.
You could say he chose if you like, but you know what? I'd prefer to say his psychological demons chose for him.
Right.
They said jump, and he jumped, just like he always did. I had a friend in Florida who taught meditation at Rayford, the state penitentiary in Stark, where Bundy, I think, was executed. That's where death row was, electric chair at that time. Old Sparky. So barbaric. It's like the turn of the century insane asylums, the way we treated mental patients back then. Overt mental patients. And he said, when he came back from one of these lessons, once he said, "You people think you have problems," talking to the people that were spiritual seekers. So you think you have problems? You can't even imagine. These men just dream of doing physical harm to other people. They lie awake at night thinking of ways they can do physical hurt to other people, the demons that they have. Because he'd seen it and he'd heard it. And naturally what we do is we put them in zoos, we put them in an animal cage and together, and let them wreak their violence and their craziness on each other. And then we turn them loose. We turn them back into society on ourselves. And a couple of us who cross paths with them get ground into hamburger, and we catch them again and put them back in. And so it goes. Pedophiles. Do you think a grown man, usually a male, a grown man wants to have sex with a little child? You think that's a free will act? Who's crazy? There's something went way wrong in their upbringing. This isn't blaming the parents or anything. And if the parents did abuse them, they were crazy.
That's right.
And so it goes. I mean, we're like, read Charles Dickens. I mean, the penalty for virtually everything. And Oliver Twist comes to mind. At that time in England, first offense, hanging. You got the noose for stealing a silk handkerchief. And you were a child. They would hang you. Put a rope around your neck and hang you to death for stealing. And his editorial line was that it did nothing. Nothing, it accomplished nothing except it removed the perpetrator from this earth forever. It did that much. You couldn't argue with that. But it did nothing to treat crime. It did nothing to treat crime. And what crime? Once again, Wall Street? Those pigs who've bought our government? The rich who during Dwight D. Eisenhower paid a tax on their wealth beyond a few $1 million of 90%? And because they have steadily bought government, our government, of the people, for the people, by the people, my ass. What we have now, 37% for somebody who makes $1 billion a year. Good God, wake up. And that's crime. That's that crime, white collar crime. That's where the real money is. This is chump change. Us poverty-ridden dumb butts that are the masses out here who are kept under the gun. If you smoke that marijuana, boy, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, That's illegal. Nicotine kills hundreds of thousands of Americans every year, untold millions worldwide. It's perfectly legal. You can drink liquor, alcohol till it comes out your butt and turns people into morons and makes them violent and makes them stupid. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's legal. As long as you're stupid, as long as you can drag your ass back to work Monday morning, we don't care what you do. But something that makes you question the system and think about life and makes you wonder, what's wrong with the society? What do you mean I should be a blind cog in the machine and go kill people in Afghanistan?
Excuse me.
I mean, that's illegal, that stuff. Those are bad drugs. Those are bad. Okay. It's if this sounds like an insidious conspiracy, it is. But it's not the clowns. It's not like the Koch brothers, who the New Yorker article this week has described giving $100 million to right-wing causes. See, the only people who are really justified, who are really smart in being conservative, are the rich, because they've got it all. They like it the way it is. They don't want nothing to change. Well, if I can argue for change, I'd like it to go back to the Gilded Age, where we could work children to death for a nickel an hour. The good old days, before women had the vote and blacks were de facto slaves. Let's go back to when America really meant something, when we could be proud of our country. I mean, I talk like that because you're just about as dumbass stupid as you can get. Poor people voting for the Republican Party. Are you kidding? Poor people thinking a multimillionaire like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck are telling you the truth? Are you kidding? You're slaves. You're being brainwashed by the rich who buy big media. They own it. They own the message. Ted Turner said years ago, everything you read, see, and hear is basically controlled by 5 corporations.
Well, you know what that brings me to the thought of control that you're talking about, and media in control. One of the ways that you could say the elite are maintaining control is through fear. And one of the ways they promote fear in the populace is through the fear of crime. That they pump up the impression of crime to keep us all nervous about being outside and doing things. And then they get to look like they're powerful because they're solving crimes. And one example I'll give of this is that, say, murder. When a murder has been committed, it'll be splashed on the front page of the newspapers and trumpeted on local TV that, there was a murder. And the implication is that it was a random crime, that nobody, they don't know who did it. And we should all be really nervous because, we may die in our bed tomorrow. And then a week later, it turns out that the murderer was the best friend or the boyfriend, or that there was a connection in some way. And I don't have the statistics on the tip of my tongue here, but the overwhelming majority of murders are people who know each other. And the number of random murders is tiny, infinitesimal. But the news of who the murderer was does not get the attention that the random murder does. Same thing with child abductions. Almost all child abductions are family members because of some divorce or something happened. Very few random child abductions happen in this country. And yet there's this pervasive fear that there's this runaway how about Halloween candy, and all those urban legends about how you have to be careful about what your children get on Halloween.
Razor blade in the apple.
That were completely groundless. And yet everyone's changed their behavior because of this fear.
Bad boys, what you going to do? What? Look, poor people getting busted.
17 years ago when we published Game of God, we traveled around the country and visited every major city in this country and never had any problems. And I kind of joked because we always went to where the bookstores were, and there's no bookstores in the ghettos. And I mean, it's not really a joke.
Sad.
But true that our routes kept us out of the ghetto because there were no bookstores. And that's what we were doing, was visiting bookstores. However, one of the things we talked about, because that was back early 90s, was a time when, it was the crack epidemic and the crime rates were spiraling, and it was huge news at that time. And we talked about that, like, where was the crime? We didn't see the crime. We were strangers in strange cities, and, it wasn't out there like they make it sound like it's just out there waiting to get you. And so I think that crime is, it's something I just talked about a little while ago with my neighbor's wife, that I think a lot of crime is manipulated as a form of social control. When you look at who's in our prisons, it's black people. I mean, what proportion of black men are involved in the criminal justice system, either in prison, on parole, or are have a felon, as a felon, I guess you'd say? I mean, what, 10%? I mean, it's
more.
I'm probably more, maybe 25%. I mean, it's a social control mechanism that this is the way we're keeping the black men down in 2010, is by making them criminals. And it's still going on. And this is how
it's like divide and conquer. If you look at what you said about stay home, you can keep people insulated from each other, cut off from each other. It's part of the divisiveness of the right to different is bad.
Right.
Foreign, different color skin, different customs, specials.
I mean, when you look at, we're supposedly the land of the free, and when we incarcerate more of our people than any other nation on earth, I mean, what's wrong? There's something really, really wrong here.
The rich are in control. That's what's wrong. It's a plutocracy. It's not a democracy.
It seems to me that really taking a look at crime and our attitudes toward crime and our criminal justice system is a very important question to be asking if we really care about our liberty. One of the things that really bothers me is that prisons have become a source of income they've been privatized. Prisons have been privatized by governments to save money for state money. So now it's a money-making enterprise by private corporations, which, let's see, in order to keep our profit margin up, we need to make sure we have lots of prisoners coming through at all times, which means we have to keep crime really, make more things crimes and keep funneling the chum through.
That's right.
And does that, for me, the idea of a privatized prison system is totally anathema to what a free country should be. For a lot of reasons, and I don't really, want to take the time to go through that. But, I mean, that's just one reason, is that if it's a profit-making enterprise, it's going to require that you make more prisoners to keep the profits up. And
it occurred to me that
that's fine.
Yeah, that that Nancy Grace, we call her Nasty Disgrace. Nancy Grace epitomizes the kind of overall approach to crime in this country, which is totally vengeance-oriented, retaliation, blame, punishment, punish, crime and punishment already. Mm-hmm. What we say, the alternative should be crime and treatment. And the reason we don't have that, of course, is because we're insane ourselves. We do not realize that what we're talking about here is a mechanistic process. Psychological devil, psychological angel. We know better, But if you are a person who wants to molest a child, given the opportunity, given the right conditions, is going to do it. It doesn't matter. Walk over dead bodies to do it. We should have learned that in Prohibition, speaking of the idiotic war on drugs. When people want to do something, especially Americans, they're going to damn well find a way to do it. So our approach to crime isn't accomplishing anything except, as Katie said, locking up an obscene percentage of our own people in human zoos, supermax. What we need are a hell of a lot more maximum security or minimum security or low security mental institutions, treatment centers, to find out what goes on in the mind of a compulsive criminal, be it a serial killer or a speeder, someone who breaks the speeding laws and the traffic laws, someone who drinks and gets behind the wheel, an alcoholic. It's the same thing. As a matter of fact, that's a perfect analogy. People have, in AA, so they've been sober for 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden they'll get the idea that it's okay to have a drink at lunch. Game over. Before you can blink, they're right back in it. No control. That's why in AA, when anybody gets up to speak, they say, "Hi, my name is Arthur, and I'm an alcoholic." They admit their weakness. They acknowledge their inability to control a part of their lives. But what we say is, you robbed that 7-Eleven, so we're going to put you in jail. We're going to make you go to a human zoo for a couple of years, and that'll teach you. We'll put a hurting on you, and you're going to remember that hurting. Just like, never beat your children. Never give them a whipping. Never lay a hand on them. You're not doing anything but imposing violence. You're showing your child the worst part of you, because all violence is an act of insanity. All crime is an act of insanity. That's what we're saying.
So, and I would think that when you, how many people are imprisoned for minor drug offenses? A lot. So you just changed
people who've never hurt anybody.
Laws.
They just want to smoke a little weed or something, or snort some coke. Who cares?
How many people are in prison because their life choices were so circumscribed by our dog-eat-dog social order that, we put so little money into education.
I don't like circumscribed. How about ruined?
Well, what I meant by
Destroyed.
if you were born in the ghetto to a mother who has a drug addiction and is illiterate, and you go to an inner city school that basically, when there's no education at all, your life is circumscribed. You have no choice. You have no chance, in terms of possibilities for life. You get no education. You have no training for jobs. We have consigned millions of our fellow citizens to a life of crime because that's their only alternative. When you look at people in the ghettos who are drug dealers, they're entrepreneurs. We should actually be praising them because they at least have some initiative. Really, when you think about it, they have our society gives those people zero options. And then we are surprised when they turn to crime. So for me, the whole solution to crime is a reordering of our social priorities, which that's a joke. I'm a utopian. I have an optimist, and I envision something that would take hundreds of years to get to because our social, anyway. But so what I'm saying is you take out the people who are in prison for drug use and for lack of educational opportunities, that they aren't really criminals. They're just there because of these circumstances of our society. When you get down to the people who
That's not bleeding heart. That's the truth. You get desperate. You get poor.
Right.
You wonder where your next meal is coming from.
That's right.
You look at people wearing $50,000 Rolexes.
That's right.
You get a drug habit that's eating your guts out, and you need a fix.
Right. That's
because of
right.
our idiotic drug laws.
So if you just took all those people out, I mean, I think you would get down to a very, really small number of people that are of the criminal mind, who are
pathologically
criminal. So, I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about that large a number of people. And that would be, these are the people you're talking about. What went wrong? I mean, when I think about somebody who develops a software virus and then unleashes it on the planet with the intention of destroying millions of people's computers for no gain of their own, part of my mind struggles to understand. I don't understand that. I don't understand why somebody would find pleasure in the wholesale destruction of people they don't even know.
It's just a grand version of vandalism. That's what it is, which is a regular feature of adolescence.
So, but that's a type
What's that?
of. So
maybe
right.
we could study that. Maybe we could find out what's behind that, and we could figure out a way to really handle it.
Right.
But that would require us getting off our high horse and pointing the finger and saying, "You're a criminal. You're no good. I'm better than you." Eduardo Wong, who shot that trooper locally. I mean, I look at him and I hate him. And then I think, no, you're writing a book on the subject. He's crazy. He was crazy to do that. He was crazy. I mean, he wasn't carrying any drugs or anything. I mean, why did he do that?
Right.
Why did he do that? His life is done. It's over. It's over. And certainly the trooper's life was over. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, do you want to just do the knee-jerk thing and blame somebody and hate them? Or do you want to say, maybe we could find out what's wrong with this person and what's wrong with all people who want to do physical harm to each other? Of course, when we sit watching the NFL, like I did last night, watching the Denver Broncos, I mean, it's wonderful. I love to watch football. It's incredible, the skill and the grace and something even beyond skill, the way a quarterback and a receiver can connect. It's just magnificent. Or a runner can anticipate and evade destruction. It's incredible.
Yes, it is.
And we have a few more important things than grown men playing with their balls to focus on, and that is the fact that, in this case, what we're talking about is universal human insanity. The way we treat our criminals is just another example of it, just like the way we treat our mental patients.
Well, and like Arthur referred to real briefly, we think that in 100 years, we'll look back at the way we're treating our criminals now with the same kind of shock at the primitiveness as the way currently we look back at the way insane people were treated 100 years ago.
If we're still here 100 years from now.
That we were just amazed that we could be so blind to the true causes and that we would have been in a position of having so little compassion for what was really driving those people.